What's up guys, welcome to 𝗗𝗢𝗣𝗘. Today I'm going to be going over some tips you can use to hopefully make it easier to add sounds to your main melody or samples. If you got some subbed already, it'll take us to do so because it's up to light. Let's hop right into it. So I just made a slightly different melody other than our first one in the first vid. So this is the first one. This is the new one right here, just so it's not repetitive. Okay, so we can go ahead and get started. All right, so this first one is pretty simple and it's just keeping realistic sounds together. Now you don't have to do this all the time, but if you struggle with sound selection, this is kind of an easy way to go about it. So like putting orchestral sounds together, so piano, strings, maybe even like guitars, stuff like that, you can kind of put together and it'll automatically sound good. So we have a piano. Okay, and then I just threw in some strings, just some, just any strings. And then here. Okay, you can see they sound pretty good. They're not really fighting each other. And you'll get this result usually when you kind of add realistic instruments. So that's it. These are just kind of some quick tips. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so the next one is kind of a mix of this, or like the second level of this. So when we are using synths, you can kind of do the same thing. We can kind of keep them very tribal, so you want them in the same family. So use synths with synths. Now, of course, you can use, a combo of all of these, right? But this is if you struggle with the sound selection and you're like, I'm not really sure what sounds go together, you can kind of bypass it by doing these or following these rules, right? So I have these labeled genre because with synths and stuff, you want to make sure your sounds match the genre. So this is kind of like a sad, pain melody, right? So I just pretty much applied the same thing here. If we play it, right, you can see it sounds good, but it doesn't really work for the type of melody. So it's important to recognize what genre you're using, because these are kind of like hyper pop, kind of like EDM sounds, right? And they don't really sound that great on a like pain melody, right? This sounds a lot better if you just have a piano. Okay, so just keep that in mind, okay, when making your stuff. So if you're trying to add sounds to a sample, recognize what sample you're making. If you're making if you have a vintage sample, you want to try to add vintage like sounds, okay, and make sure you match the effects and stuff, which we'll talk about later. So that is the second tip. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so now we're gonna get into more like deep sound selection. So basically I have these labeled same character and opposite temperature. So I've made videos in this previously, but pretty much each sound you can categorize it into like a warm or a cold sound, or thick or thin. So thick or thin or warm and cold just means how much bass it has. So if it doesn't really have bass in it like that, it's usually like a colder sound, as you can see right here, right? It kind of sounds like a Christmas bell, something like that. And a warmer sound will be something like a piano. Okay, so how does this come into play? Pretty much when picking sounds, you can get away with a lot if you kind of pick sounds that are around the same character. So a piano is more warm. You can see the frequencies here. It's like kind of in this middle area. So I picked a sound here. Okay, it was similar and all. Right, it's kind of in the same area. It's a little lower, but you can see it's kind of in the same realm. You can get away with a lot, and they will blend well together. So I'll play them. You can see they kind of sound like one sound. You probably can't even tell which one is which, right? So that is one thing you can get away with. And also you can use opposite temperatures to kind of add to it to make it sound like it's more, more being added to the melody. So in this case, you would do the opposite. So if your sound is usually like in this area, right, you would add a sound that kind of goes opposite of that, right? So that's why I chose this. Oops, make sure I reset these. Okay, like I said, a lot of these are extreme examples. I wouldn't use this sound in this instance, but I'm just trying to show you so you know the exact type of sound I'm talking about. All right, so that's the end of that. Let's move on. All right, so next we have ambient tone, and pretty much to keep this simple, because this is the most complex one, but it's pretty much just overriding the vibe that you already have. Even though it's the same notes, you can kind of change the vibe. So this is like a synth wavy type of sound. I'll just play it. Okay, so if we blend this in with the piano, it'll change the vibe slightly, right? Right, this sounds a lot more like ambient, like space type vibe, right? So how I'm able to do this is I'll use an example for like color. So you have purples, blues, greens, you know, blues, all type of stuff, right? So I'm gonna put a filter. I'm gonna put like a yellow filter or something. I'll edit it on. You can see, even though you can tell this is purple, you can kind of tell that it has a yellow tint. So everything is kind of yellow now, right? And that's pretty much what we're doing with this ambient tone, right? And this is, I'm gonna just keep it there because we can go on forever trying to use examples for this. So that is something you can use as well if you want to blend synths and realistic sounds together. All right, so now to further blend our synths and realistic sounds, we've opened the doors with our ambient tone. So now we can kind of just add whatever we need, right? So to do this, what you want to make sure you do with these like synths, or if it's opposite, right, you want to make sure you match the effects of the original. So if your sample has like a vintage type of sound to it, you want to kind of match this, right? Because they will clash a bit. Now there are instances where this doesn't work or it just sounds good not having the effects, right? But usually you want to match the effects. So for example, my piano has a little bit of reverb, so I added reverb to this sound. Okay, so I'll play them. Right, and this is a super like synth wave type of sound, and it wouldn't usually work, but because we did all this, it kind of fits. It's not perfect, like I said, these are extreme sounds. I wouldn't necessarily use this sound with this, but I just want to get the point across. So there's that. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so this last one is pretty simple. So it's just adding, you know, the same type of sound. So if you have a piano, how do you add, you know, guitar, string, or any other realistic sound? Now, again, you want to match the effects. So with these, I just have automatically a reverb. Now, I like this plugin because it puts it in space. It doesn't just add reverb, it puts the sound in space, which makes it blend better. So that is just one thing you can do. So I'm gonna mute, we'll keep this muted. And this is the guitar, just the normal one I use. So I have notes down. Now, when adding these sounds, you want to match the rhythm and stuff of the original. You don't want to combat it by, you know, shifting it, which you can, you know, you can put it wherever you want to put it, right? But if you look like where our chords meet and some of these notes hit, it's on the same spots, which will help it blend in, right? And it's something you can just be conscious of. It doesn't mean you have to do it, right? So I'll just make sure. Right, you can see how it kind of blends in this way, right? And same thing with the violin that I used. I just kind of matched the rhythm or the flow. I would say flow is a better word to use. So here you can see. Okay, now this is a harsher sound. You will probably use some velocity, like some volume, just like fade it out, stuff like that. Okay, so that is how you can kind of blend in your realistic instruments. So I'm not gonna go too in depth. These are just supposed to be tips. So let's go to the last one, which is just the bass, which is super simple. All right, so let's go over the bass. Now this is more for people who maybe they feel like their melodies aren't full enough. So if you add bass, it'll add that low end that you need to kind of fill it out. So I'll play with the piano. Okay, kind of adds that extra tone. Now don't confuse loudness with fullness, okay? I think fullness is just you have what you need, okay, for what you're trying to do. All right, so with this bass we can add like a guitar, right? You can see the frequencies here. Now this doesn't mean you don't add anything, right? It just means you have enough there now with the bass in there. We could try other sounds too. Okay, pretty simple stuff. But that's gonna be it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, new, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.